Mr. Clark and members of the board, we do have 2 items for board discussion this evening. Our first item, special education staffing needs. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Clark and members of the board, I just wanted to make you aware that in preparation for the 24-25 school year, we have done an extensive audit on our student numbers and needs in regards to special education to ensure that we're compliant with state mandates. The number of students entering our schools with special education needs who require specially designed instruction for functional academic skills has increased greatly. And due to this increase, we will be creating 3 new multiple disability/social communication classrooms for the 24-25 school year. 2 of these units will be housed at North Elementary, and 1 will be at Compass Elementary. Each unit requires us to hire an intervention specialist and 2 educational assistants to meet the intensive needs of the students that we are serving. These new units, these hires, they are mandated requirement by the state, and they must happen so that we're in compliance. The good news is that we've worked closely with Nancy, and the cost of these additions are included in the 5-year forecast that she'll be presenting to you this evening. Unless you have any questions, there's no action that is needed from you in regards to this. This is more just an FYI, and make sure you're aware of the additions that we're going to be making going into next school year.
Okay. Any questions or discussions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Howard.
Thank you.
All right, our next item for board discussion is the 5-year forecast. This time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening. So tonight we have an update regarding the 5-year forecast. And as you may recall, the 5-year forecast gets shared with our public in November and May of each year. This presentation serves as just a small piece of information that's included in this 22-page document that will be available on our website tonight. So I encourage our community to review that document for more detailed information than what I'm able to share here tonight. So during the presentation, we're just going to talk quickly about the forecast purpose and objectives, our revenue and expenditure updates. Also going to review our financial summary and talk about maybe some next steps and allow for questions at the end. So you may have seen this before. Just to share with our community, this forecast is to engage the board in long-range planning and discuss potential financial issues facing the district. It also serves as a basis for determining if the district can certify what they call the 412 certificate. And lastly, it provides information to the Department of Education and Auditor's Office of any potential financial problems. So just to give you an overall picture, the majority of our district's revenue comes from our local taxes, about 47%. The second largest portion of our revenue is coming from state funding at about 41%. Some updates to the forecast from November. As we had projected, our property taxes collections did increase by about 4.5%, which amounted to about $2 million. That was due to the reappraisal that the county went through. Under restricted grants and aid, which is part of our state funding, we received a one-time stipend for what they call high-quality instructional materials, almost $500,000. And Mrs. Ogg and her team are determining what materials would be approved by the state for her to purchase, and that is included in next year's expenditure line item of supplies and materials. So we'll see that a little later on. It's actually in the forecast, sorry. A big change for us has been in the all other operating revenues category. We have increased those projections due to our interest income coming in higher than what was projected, which is a great thing. Secondly, we had some what they call tax increment financing districts become active during the first half of 2023, and so we collected some additional revenue from those, also from the reappraisal. The amounts of those tax incentive payments were increased. So good news there. One thing I just wanted to share with the board for next year, we will receive a bit of a loss in our unrestricted grants, which is our state money, from reducing our transportation services. So there's revenue that the state gives us for transportation. We are anticipating a loss in that revenue of about $1.2 million. And also, just as a reminder, from the reappraisal, State funding drops as property values increase because the state feels that our district has become wealthier. So they shift the funding back on our local people instead of the state giving us that money. So just want to make sure I brought that up. Here are our projections. So for this year, we're projecting about revenue of about $114.4 million, fairly steady throughout the life of the forecast, except you see that one dip later in 2027. That's due to all of the reappraisal values being implemented with the state funding that we receive. So that may change because we'll have a new state budget by then. So again, projections are only as good as on the day you do them. So tomorrow they'll change, and the next day and the next day. So that's what our projections are for revenue at the moment. Moving on to expenditures, the majority, or 77%, goes to personnel, so that's salary and benefits. And then 14% of our district's budget is used for purchase services for such things as contracting with agencies to provide services for our special education population, and utilities is another big one in that group. So some expenditure updates. Salaries are coming in lower than projections this year, and that's due to some of the cost-saving measures we put in place at the beginning of this year. We are seeing some lower overtime and substitute cost, which is a great thing. We also are projecting lower severance payouts this year than what we had projected. The employee benefits piece ties directly in with those salaries. We are estimating those to come in lower also. So one thing I wanted to mention is we added an option for our health plan this year in January of 2024. And that is an option with a lower costing health insurance premium for both the employees and for the district. So I think as more employees hear from their peers about how well that may be working out, that's one area that maybe will help try to reduce some of that increase for future years. So we'll see how that goes. Purchase services is one category, again, that's going to come in probably a little higher than our projections. And that's because we've had to contract out more services for our special needs population. Projecting our expenditures this year to be almost $112 million. So I wanted to give you just a brief update on next year's items. So due to that March levy failure, the reductions listed in that statement of facts passed by the board have been implemented for fiscal year 25. We've also had to include some additional positions, as Mrs. Howard mentioned, with our special ed population growing. And that, in fact, the transportation chauffeurs is tied to that special ed population also. So we've had to add some staff as well as along with those reductions. Looking at our expenditure projections for the next several years, again, this year we're looking at approximately $112 million to be spent, and then steadily increasing over the life of the forecast. So this is our financial summary. With that additional revenue that we're receiving and the lower than expected expenditures for the year, we are actually having revenue surplus this year, which is great. We haven't had that for a while. So we are projecting that, with future reductions that we put into place, that we'll have a cash balance through June 30th of 2027. Again, there'll be another state budget coming into play in 26 and 27, so this, of course, will change. But we are still facing a deficit in fiscal year 28 as projected right now. So some of the next steps that the board may have to take is, on June 27th, we'd like to review how our end of the year results have come in, and then also begin that discussion regarding how to address that future deficit. And that concludes my update for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lang. Any questions from the board?
I'll make a comment. Nancy does a great job. This is
Thank
a
you.
lot of numbers to go through.
Did you read all this?
Yeah, twice. Front and back.
Yeah, I'm sure. But again, there's a lot more detail in these pages than what I just presented tonight. So I do encourage everybody to take a look at that when you have time. Thank you.
Yep, and then in June, we'll have a better idea as well. As like you said, it changes somewhat day to day until it's
Right.
finalized. So.
Right. And one thing I'll just mention, just to throw that out, like the expenditure piece. So we have 4 buses that we ordered the past 2 years that have not come in yet. So that payment is going to hit with, probably along with the 2 buses that we're going to order next year. So we have 6 buses that we have to pay for next year. So somebody asked me, like, why is there such a jump in expenditures? And it's like, well, we may be paying for 6 buses in one fiscal year. So it's a timing issue
Yeah,
on
yeah.
some of that, so.
And Mr. Perry, I'm going to ask, is that kind of like because the parts, the production was kind of pushed back and held off because of the COVID
Yes.
era, if you will?
Yes, part of it is still recovering from the COVID, you know, whatever you want to call that. But in addition to that, we ordered some special ed buses, and those just naturally take a little bit longer. So it's kind of like the perfect storm, as Nancy's highlighting.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Lane.
Thank you.
As always, you do a great job. We appreciate you.
Thank you.